You know, standing here looking around at the gum trees and the peace and the atmosphere, you'd swear you're at any picnic area in the heart of Australia. There's families mulling around, picking wild flowers, having picnics together, and just over there there's a mountain bike race going on. Yet the strange thing about this place, this is the Anzac War Memorial, just a few kilometres from the Gaza Strip. In 1917, Aussie troops were involved in both attacks against Gaza that failed, and of course a lot of Australians lost their lives. It wasn't until Beersheba had fallen that a week later Gaza finally fell to British troops, and then they began to push up the retreat of the Turkish armies all the way northward up the Philistine Plain towards Jaffa. As you drive north alongside the Gaza Strip, you can't help but feel the chill of the current political situation. As we drove past the Israeli town of Sderot, we saw children playing, only to learn that later in the day, a Palestinian rocket injured 2 children in the town. So as we move through the green fields of the Philistine Plain, it's probably as better time as any to explain the political situation as it was in 1918. It's really quite amazing when you look into it, because you soon find out that a lot of the trouble that continues here today was kick-started by an awful amount of mishandling 90 years ago. Basically, it went like this. For over 400 years, nearly all of the Middle East was under what was called the Ottoman Empire, ruled from Constantinople in Turkey. These guys were pretty nasty in their ways, and the Arabs were certainly not happy with the situation. And with the outbreak of World War I and the Turks going into bat for the Germans, Britain and her allies just couldn't focus on the European situation. They had to deal with the possibility of losing control of their interests in the Middle East. And they wanted the Turks out of Palestine and Syria as much as the Arabs did. But the question was, what would happen to these and the surrounding lands if and when the Turks were finally kicked out? In 1916, a famous agreement was made between the British and French called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It became famous not because it was so good, but because it was the catalyst to a lot of embarrassment and mistrust when it was publicly released a year later. You see, it was a secret agreement between France and England about how they wanted to divide up the various countries after the war. It was all about getting the right people on the right side, and woven into this web of secrecy was the deals Britain were offering the Arabs if they worked with them to defeat the Ottomans. And this is where the whole Lawrence of Arabia thing kicks in. We'll hear more about him as we go further north, but in a nutshell, he was Britain's front man in their behind-the-scenes support of restoring an Arab kingdom to these parts. So by 1917 it looked like this. The Allies were pushing the Turks north on this side of the Dead Sea, while they were quietly supporting a small Arab army to try and push the Turks north on the other side of the Dead Sea in what is now called Jordan. So the Gaza line had finally been broken, and by the second week of November, the Allied infantry and mounted divisions were successfully forcing the Turkish armies northward. And it was hearing this news that the political leaders in London gave General Allenby the directive to take Jerusalem by Christmas time as a gift to the Christian world. It's obvious that the Philistine Plain of today is very different to the Philistine Plain of late 1917. Yet our guide Danny has informed us that this area here, just in from Ashdod, is very similar to the Philistine Plain that the terrain that they would have ridden over in 1917. There was a young trooper called Ian Idris who kept all of his diaries of the time, and he turned them into a book called The Desert Column. If ever you have a chance to read, it is a fantastic book explaining firsthand what it was like for a young Australian to come up through this area. He made mention of David and Goliath, of Samson, The Crusaders came through here. Napoleon came through here, and now here they were, the young Anzacs, riding their neddies up through this beautiful country. He said, you never quite knew whose dust you were riding in. You can tell by the failing light that this is right on sunset. It's taken us a full day to make our way here from Beersheba up the Philistia Plain, looking at various sites. It took the guys 17 days to make it through to here, and this is the old building behind me. I'm so pleased to find it. I looked it on Google Earth and was hoping we'd find this place. It's called Junction Station. It's another very important railway station, and it's right opposite Jerusalem, and this is the old original Jerusalem railway, went past here. Now, as you can see by the earthworks, they're modernising it, but this is the old original line toward Jerusalem. So once this station was taken, it severed the communication route for the Turkish army from the north, past Jaffa, Tel Aviv, down to here. At junction went down to Beersheba or up to Jerusalem. So once this station was taken, it really broke the back of the Turkish army and kept them north of this line. Now, an interesting point, this station was taken by 2 armoured cars, 2 British armoured cars. That's all it took. The Turks were in retreat, and they stopped about 10 kilometres north of me. Here is where the line ceased.